and you don't expect to find a battlefield inside a local super-mart. You expect fluorescent lights, the smell of baking bread, and the annoying squeak of shopping cart wheels. But wars start in strange places. Sometimes they start over a bag of groceries. I was there to pick up supplies for the clubhouse. Just milk, coffee, and enough eggs to feed 20 hungry bikers. It was 10 a.m. on a Wednesday. The store was quiet, mostly filled with stay-at-home moms and retirees, and I was standing in line at register 3. Behind the counter was George. George wasn't your typical grocery bagger. He was 82 years old, and his back was permanently curved from decades of hard labor. His hands were covered in liver spots and shook slightly when he reached for a can of soup, but his apron was pressed crisp, and pinned right over his heart was a small, tarnished pin Korea veteran. George didn't work fast. He worked with care, and he treated a carton of eggs like it was a crate of nitroglycerin. He chatted with every customer. "How's the hip, Mrs. Higgins?" he asked the lady in front of me, and smiling with dentures that were a little too white. "Make sure you don't lift those heavy jugs. Let me carry them to your car." He was slow, and painfully slow for a world that is obsessed with speed. But he was the soul of this place. That's when he walked up, the new manager, and his name tag said, Kevin. And he looked like he was about 12 years old, wearing a cheap tie and holding a clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments. And he had been pacing behind the registers, tapping his foot, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Kevin didn't see a war hero. He didn't see a grandfather. And he saw a bottleneck in his efficiency report. "George," Kevin barked, his voice cracking loud enough to silence the front end of the store. "What are you doing? And look at this line. It's 3 people deep." George froze. His shaking hand dropped a loaf of bread. He looked terrified. "I'm sorry, sir. And Higgins was just telling me about—" "I don't care about Mrs. Higgins," Kevin snapped, stepping into George's personal space. "I care about scan per minute ratios, and yours are pathetic. You're slowing us down, old man." I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I gripped the handle of my shopping cart so hard the plastic groaned. George tried to pick up the bread. "I'll speed up, sir. I promise. And my hands are a little stiff this morning because of the rain." "It's always an excuse," Kevin sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear, and he grabbed the apron off George's chest, unclipping it roughly. "You're too old, you're too slow, and frankly, you're an embarrassment to the brand. Get out, and don't even clock out. Just go." The silence in the store was heavy. Mrs. Higgins looked like she was about to cry. George stood there, humiliated, and stripped of his apron and his dignity in front of his neighbors. He looked small. He looked broken. He didn't fight back. He just nodded, his eyes filling with tears, and turned to walk toward the sliding glass doors. He walked with a shuffle, his head down, defeated. Kevin turned to me, putting on a fake customer service smile, and, "Sorry about the wait, sir. I'll bag your items myself. We prefer speed here." I looked at Kevin. Then I looked at George, who was stopping at the door to wipe his eyes, and I pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock the screen. I just pressed the side button to send a priority alert to the group chat. "You like speed, Kevin?" I asked, and my voice low and rumbling like a distant storm. "That's good, because you're going to need it." I left my full cart right there on the belt, and I turned around and walked out the door, catching up to George in the clot. "George," I called out. He stopped, looking scared. He saw my leather vest, my tattoos, and my scars. He thought his day was about to get worse. "I'm sorry," George stammered. "I don't have any money." I put a hand on his shoulder. "I don't want your money, and brother. I want to know what time your shift was supposed to end." "At 2 p.m., he whispered. "Good," I said, checking my watch. "It was 1:15 a.m., and because you aren't going home yet, my friends are hungry, and we only let the best bag our groceries." I keyed my radio. "Big Mac. This is Jack's. And bringing a code respect at the super-mart on 5th. Bring the boys. And bring the shopping lists. We're going to clean this place out, and if you believe that nobody should be fired just for getting old, smash that like button." Kevin wanted to see efficiency. He's about to see the Motor Mafia, and inside the store, Kevin felt good. He had removed the bottleneck. He adjusted his tie, looking at the empty register 3 where George used to stand. He smiled, and thinking his efficiency report was going to look perfect today. He didn't know that efficiency was about to get run over by a freight train. It started at 1:45 a.m. first, and the vibration rattled the stack of canned peas in aisle 1. Then, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered. Then came the sound, a low and rhythmic thumping that grew into a roar, shaking the sliding glass doors in their frames. Kevin looked up, annoyed. "What is that noise?" The automatic doors slid open, and they stayed open. They walked in 2 by 2. Big Mac was in the lead, looking like a mountain wrapped in leather. Behind him came Tank, Viper, and 140 other members of the Motor Mafia. They filled the entrance. They filled the lobby. They filled the produce section. The store went silent, and the soccer moms froze with their hands on the avocados. The cashier at Register 1 dropped a scanner. Kevin turned pale. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, and he had seen bikers before, but never this many, and never inside his store. He nervously smoothed his shirt and walked up to Big Mac, and trying to look authoritative but looking mostly like a scared child. "Excuse me," Kevin squeaked. You can't be in here in a group this large. It's a fire hazard, and we have a dress code." Big Mac looked down at Kevin. He didn't blink. He reached out and grabbed a shopping cart. "We aren't a group," Mac rumbled, "and we are individual customers, and we are hungry." Mac turned to the boys. "Shop." It was organized chaos. Every biker grabbed a cart. They didn't just buy a soda, and they were clearing the shelves. Tank loaded 20 bags of dog food into his cart. Viper cleared out the entire meat section: steaks, ribs, chicken. Others grabbed diapers and milk, bread, toilet paper. Within 10 minutes, every single shopping cart in the store was in use. The aisles were gridlocked with leather vests. At 11 a.m., and the shopping stopped. "Line up," Mac commanded. Usually, when a store is busy, people spread out to different registers. But we didn't do that, and all 145 of us formed a single line. A snake of black leather that wound from the front of the store, down the cereal aisle, past the frozen food, and all the way back to the dairy section. And we lined up at Register 3, empty one. The one George had just been fired from. Kevin ran over, sweating now. Sir, and that register is closed. Please use the self-checkout or Register 1. They are open." Big Mac stood at the front of the line with a cart full of expensive steaks, and he looked at the empty counter. Then he looked at Kevin. "I don't use self-cot," Mac said calmly. "I don't work here." "Then go to Register 1, Kevin pleaded, and pointing to the terrified teenager at the next lane. "No," Mac said. "I have delicate items, eggs, bread, soft fruit. I need a professional. I need someone with experience. And I need the best bagger you have." Mac pointed a gloved finger at the empty spot behind Register 3. "I want the man who was standing here 10 minutes ago." And Kevin's face went white. "He's unavailable." He was let go. Mac crossed his massive arms. Behind him, 144 bikers crossed their arms in unison. And the sound of leather creaking was the only noise in the store. "Then I guess we wait," Mac said. "And while we wait, all this frozen food in our carts is starting to melt." If you love watching a bully panic when he realizes he messed with the wrong family, smash that like button. And Kevin has exactly 5 minutes before he loses thousands of dollars in inventory. Kevin looked at Big Mac's cart. He saw the prime rib steaks, and he saw the 3 tubs of premium vanilla ice cream sitting on top, and he saw a single drop of condensation roll down the side of the tub and hit the conveyor belt. Drip, and that drop represented money. Kevin did the math in his head. 145 carts, each cart holding at least 200 worth of groceries. That was nearly 30 and 1,000 in inventory sitting in the lanes, slowly spoiling. "Sir, please," Kevin begged, wiping sweat from his forehead with his cheap tie. "I can bag the groceries, and I'm the fastest bagger in the district. I won an award." Kevin reached for a carton of eggs in Mac's cart. Mac's hand clamped over the eggs. "Don't touch them." And Mac leaned over the counter, his face inches from Kevin's. "I don't trust your hands. You have nervous hands. Shaky hands. You might break something." "And my hands aren't shaky," Kevin argued, holding up hands that were visibly trembling. "We want George." The bikers behind Mac chanted in a low, deep unison. "Want," and "George." Kevin looked at the long line. He looked at the melting ice cream. He looked at the security guard, and who was pretending to be very interested in a display of chewing gum or had absolutely no part of this. "Okay," Kevin shrieked. "Okay, I'll get him. Just," and stopped the melting. Kevin ran. He didn't walk. He sprinted out the automatic doors into the parking lot. We all turned to watch through the glass. And George was sitting on the curb near the cart return, his head in his hands waiting for his daughter to pick him up. He looked so small against the concrete, and Kevin skidded to a halt in front of him. We couldn't hear what was said, but we saw the body language. We saw Kevin waving his arms frantically, and we saw George looking confused. We saw Kevin point back at the store, pleading. George stood up slowly. He dusted off his trousers. He looked at the store, then at Kevin, and he hesitated. Mac tapped on the glass window with his class ring. "Tap, tap," he pointed at his wrist. "Time is money, Kevin." And Kevin nodded frantically at Mac through the glass, then grabbed George's arm, gently this time, and led him back toward the entrance. When the automatic doors slid open, and the sound hit them, it wasn't silence anymore. It was thunder. 145 bikers started clapping. It wasn't a polite golf clap, it was a rhythmic and heavy applause that shook the ceiling tiles. CLAP. George walked in looking stunned. He saw the line, he saw the carts, and he saw Big Mac standing at register 3, holding the apron that Kevin had thrown on the floor earlier. Mac walked over to George. He knelt down on one knee, and a giant showing respect to a king, and held out the apron. "We have a lot of groceries to buy, George," Mac said, his voice soft enough that only they could hear. And we heard you're the only man here who knows how to handle eggs with respect." George's eyes welled up. His chin trembled. He took the apron. I'm a little slow and sunned. "We aren't in a hurry," Mac smiled. "We've got all day." Kevin rushed behind the counter, logging George back into the register system with shaking fingers. "And clocked in, you're clocked in! Just start scanning!" Mac cleared his throat, a sound like a growling bear. He looked at Kevin. "Not yet," and Mac pointed to a stool sitting behind the customer service desk. "George's bad knees. He's a veteran. He doesn't stand for 4 hours." Kevin blinked. "And corporate policy says cashiers have to stand to look professional." Mac stared at the melting ice cream. "Get the chair," Kevin whispered, and he ran to fetch the stool and placed it behind the register. George sat down. He took a deep breath. He looked at the line of scary men in leather, and for the first time that day, he smiled a real smile. He reached for Mac's eggs with his gentle, shaking hands. "How are you doing today, sir?" George asked, and falling back into his routine. "I'm doing great, George," Mac said. "Just great. If watching a greedy boss get humiliated makes your day better, smash that like button." And T took 3 hours to check out all 145 carts. In any other store, a 3-hour wait would cause a riot, but here nobody complained. The bikers chatted with George, and they asked about his time in Korea. They asked about his grandkids. They treated him like a celebrity, not a servant. Kevin stood in the corner, holding his clipboard and watching his efficiency rating tank while his total sales skyrocketed. He was confused. He was annoyed. But he was too scared to speak. Finally, and Big Mac's order was scanned. The total came to $240.50. Mac pulled out a thick roll of cash. He peeled off $300 bills and handed them to George. "And keep the change, George," Mac said. Kevin stepped forward, unable to help himself. Actually, store policy strictly forbids employees from accepting tips, and it's a termination offense." Mac turned his head slowly. He looked at Kevin with eyes that could freeze boiling water. "I'm not tipping him," Mac said, and his voice level and dangerous. "I'm paying a debt." A debt," Kevin stammered. Mac pointed to the small, tarnished pin on George's chest, the Korea veteran pin. "And this man paid for my freedom in 1952, Mac said, loud enough for the whole line to hear. "So today I'm paying him back." And Mac took another $100 bill from his pocket. He didn't put it in the register. He folded it neatly and tucked it into the front pocket of George's apron. "And thank you for your service, brother," Mac whispered. Then he walked away. But he was just the first. Tank was next. He paid for his dog food, and then he pulled out a $50 bill and tucked it into George's apron. "Buy something nice for the grandkids, Pops." Viper was next. He dropped a 20. "And for the hip pain, get the good medicine." One by one, 144 more bikers moved through the line. Every single one of them paid for their groceries, and every single one of them left a debt payment in George's apron. By the time the last biker cleared the register, George wasn't just wearing an apron, and he was wearing a bank vault. The pockets were bulging. Cash was spilling out onto the counter. There were 5s, 10s, 20s, and in hundreds stacked in a pile that looked like a green mountain. George stood up from his stool. He looked at the pile of money. His hands were shaking, but not from age this time. He looked at Kevin. "Is this against policy?" George asked, terrified he would lose his job again. And Kevin looked at the bikers waiting by the door. He looked at the cash, probably Olden Fowler's $1,000 more than George made in 3 months. "No, George," Kevin said, and his voice quiet and defeated. "It's not against policy. Take it home." We waited for George to clock out. We walked him to his daughter's car in the parking lot and forming a protective circle so nobody would mess with him or the money. As he got into the passenger seat, George grabbed Big Mac's hand. He didn't say anything, and he didn't have to. The grip was strong. The tears in his eyes said everything. Mac tapped the roof of the car. "See you next week, George. Remember, we need eggs." And we watched the car drive away. Kevin never fired anyone for being too slow ever again. And George, he still works there. He doesn't need the money anymore, but he loves the customers, especially on Wednesdays. Because on Wednesdays, the family comes to shop. This story proves that respect is more important than speed. And if you think our veterans deserve to be treated like kings, share this video. The Motor Mafia is watching.